Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to our guest to the Futuro Observatory, where we are normally engaged in discussions about the future of education together with international experts. Today we are diving into one of the most urgent needs about education, which is what the future of education will look like in a world shaped by artificial intelligence. Today, we are joined by Charles Fadel. Hello, Charles. Thank you very much for coming. Charles is an educator, a researcher. He is the creator of the Center for Curriculum Redesign, and he's the author of the book Education for the Age of Artificial Intelligence, a book that challenges the traditional approach to education and proposes a thoughtful, human-centered framework for the decades ahead. So Charles, let's begin with the big picture. What makes this the right moment to rethink education, and how is artificial intelligence forcing the conversation in ways other trends didn't?
Well, this conversation about changing education really started 25 or so years ago. It's just that a lot of organizations or jurisdictions adopted the wording of 21st century skills. That was my first book in 2008. But very little happened. And because the final exams did not change. And so if you don't measure it, no one pays attention to it. And this is a key theme that will go back during this conversation. So that really was a need already 25 years ago. And you saw, because we were not paying attention to critical thinking, etc., you saw the disaster that started happening with social media. And you can also consider that a lot of the problems we see in the world are due to a lack of ethics, etc. So one could say that education did not shift fast enough even 25 years ago. Then COVID happened, everything went on freeze for a while. And in a sense, luckily, AI happened because now it's putting a lot more pressure again on changing the system. This change is overdue. It's what both work and life required. But education has a hard time to change. It's very inertial. And so AI is really forcing us to revisit both what should be taught and how should we be teaching it.
Thank you. And your book builds on a four-dimension framework that was already proposed by you in 2015, but now with an updated vision. Can you walk us through this new vision, this 1.2 new vision?
Certainly. So that first framework was translated into 23 languages. So it told me that, yes, it's resonating with a lot of people. With AI, you start trying to think about, well, it's not correct to say that AI cannot be fill in the blanks. Because if you start analyzing the various competencies like critical thinking or even courage, you realize that AI can have some of these characteristics. So for example, in terms of critical thinking, it can certainly give you its thoughts on a given text. It is thinking critically about the text. And so you have to think, well, if it's capable of doing this, if it's capable of being creative by mimicking creations, whether it's images or words, if it's capable of creating by mimicry, what does creativity mean now for humans? Well, it means more imagination, which is hard for an AI to do. So same thing, you can say, well, AI is not courageous. Well, yes and no. AI doesn't know fear. So for example, if you train an AI on how to fight in a fighter jet, you'll find that the AI will do things that a human would never consider doing because the AI is fearless. It doesn't know fear. And so it will plunge against the other pilots, which no human pilot would ever think of doing. So you have to look at these characteristics, these competencies, much more finely. And that's why we came up with Rev 1.2 and that book, to look at what AI could and couldn't do within a certain time horizon, so that we focus our attention on not just the competencies, but also emphasizing specific facets of the competencies.
So which are, because this was my next question, one of your core ideas is that education should now focus on what AI cannot do, no? And what are the main competencies that we should develop now?
So yes and no. And the reason why I say no is because no matter what AI can do, you still have to scaffold a student. Meaning, you could say, well, multiplication tables are not needed because the student can have a calculator. But that's not fair, because students need to learn basics of knowledge so they can build on top of that knowledge. And that takes a while. That takes us 12 to 20 years of doing so. And so AI is about the same. Just because technology can do something doesn't mean that you shouldn't also be doing it as well. So you do it to scaffold yourself, and then you have to go beyond. So it's both, not one or the other. And going beyond means at that point paying attention to what AI cannot do very well. Working with the AI so it does really well the things at speed and at scale. For example, none of us have in their head the entire internet, right? None of us can synthesize a given question on a subject we know nothing about in 2 minutes. So that's extremely powerful. But then what we can do is start looking at the answers and say, wait a second, does this make any sense? Add context, add discernment. These are the things that are going to matter so much more, and they have to be trained. So you have to know how to use the machine, and you have to know the limits of the machine and how to continue pushing yourself and the machine together.
Who should know that, the student or the teachers?
Well, both. Both, of course. And the difficulty is that teachers are not given enough time to be trained. They're not given the right materials, and there's also a certain amount of fear, I would say. Teachers are typically politically liberal, but temperamentally conservative, and so they look at technology with concern. And I'm not saying that the concern is not correct. I mean, look at the devastation due to social media or to just attention-grabbing smartphones. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to reject all of it, right? And so that's the difficult balancing act that we all need to do, is be discerning about where it makes sense to use it and where it should not be used. For instance, you see a lot of parents panicking and trying to get their kids educated even in lower school about AI. Like, come on. That's an age where they should be delving into the concrete more than ever, because later in their life they're going to be facing with not just AI but also virtual reality, etc. They need to be grounded in the world of atoms before they go to the world of bits. And that's the sort of thing that the parents don't pay attention to, and everyone's rushing too far too fast. That's why I'm saying it's always this right sizing of the use, is not no using or completely open use.
Because you have designed some contents for teachers, no?
Yes, indeed. So we have an AI literacy course for teachers, and
that we will be translating into Spanish.
Be translating, yeah. Exactly, and that will be wonderful, because that's the sort of training that everyone's asking for. Because typically the training falls into two categories. Either it's very shallow, it happens in 3 hours, it's just just a vague expose of what it is, or it's too deep, it's computer science like, yeah, about algorithms and so on. So it's not what the teacher needs. So I'm going to give you an analogy. Everybody needs to learn how to drive a car, but you don't need to be a car mechanic or a mechanical engineer. And so the teacher needs to know how to drive the car, drive AI, use AI properly without necessarily being an algorithm developer or an IT specialist. So, but to give them that, you have the other extreme that says, well, this is what a car looks like, and that's it in 3 hours. So you have to find the right balance. Again, it's not just this is what the car looks like, or you don't have to be a mechanical engineer. Drive the car.
So I think that we might also need content for parents, no?
Yes, yes. So parents' education is really critical and very often underappreciated. because about 40% of someone's success in life that's not genetic, that comes from the other part, that's either our societal environment or school. 40% is schooling, 60% is social environment. And so if the social environment doesn't know how to use these things or uses them wrong, as we were just discussing, that's a terrible disservice to the student. And so yes, parents need to be a lot more educated, and unfortunately there's always a lot of pressure to overreact.
Yeah.
Or underreact for that matter.
Yeah. So finally, if a policymaker or a school leader reads your book today, what are the first concrete steps you would want them to take, and where does meaningful transformation begin?
So, very different audiences here, the policymaker versus the school leader. The school leader is really working bottom up. So the school leader has to start thinking, well, I still have a little bit of margin in my behavior. What can I do to modernize what we teach? Should we really be spending so much time on trigonometry and so little time on data science? Can I try to move things a bit? Can I try to figure out how to do after-school activities about technology and engineering, social sciences, entrepreneurship, just to round up the student a lot better? The policymakers, on the other hand, have a huge responsibility that they're not even aware of, and that is changing the baccalaureates or equivalent. Every country has some form of bachillerato, right? And that's a huge problem because they dictate what gets taught before. And if they don't pay attention to modernized disciplines or to modern disciplines or to competencies, if that's not reflected on the test, no one's going to care about it before. And so they have this huge responsibility that they're not aware of. They don't realize the extent to which they control the future of their country. It's literally. It's really not an exaggeration. In every country, there are just a few people who are in charge of that final exam, and they have a disproportionate amount of influence on what their country will become, and they don't realize it.
Yeah.
And our role is to put them in front of that responsibility and saying, you need to be courageous.
And have you faced them? I mean, have you had
Yeah. We're starting
in the ministries, in the government?
We're starting to, because before you can have this conversation, you have to say, and this is what we recommend instead, right? You cannot just come and say, change, you figure it out. It will take 20 years. You have to be prepared and saying, look, here's not just the vision, but here's all the materials that allow you to change at a fast rate. Now you have no excuse left. You cannot say, well, we don't have the vision, we don't have the materials. It's all ready for you. Listen to us. So it's really both approaches that are needed simultaneously. So we spent the first 12 years of my center developing all of what was needed so that we can have this conversation, which we started in 2018 at the OECD, but COVID stopped it. And now we're restarting it this year.
So you're having these discussions with the OECD first to define?
Not with the OECD, with specific countries.
Within, yeah.
Exactly.
Good. Okay, so Charles, thank you very much for this wonderful conversation about the future of education. And I mean, your words tell us that although technology will accelerate the pace of transformation, it will be human values like wisdom, creativity, or purpose that would really show us the
Absolutely,
the
wisdom,
way forward.
purpose, adaptability, these are all the right words.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure, thank you.